live on Facebook. Say what's up real quick.
What's going on? What's going on, Dante Nation fans? Bo Matt.
Bo Matt, Terrence Crawford training right here.
Watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Shakur Stevenson completely shuts out Joet Gonzalez. Wasn't even competitive. Surprised me. I thought the fight would be a little bit more competitive than that, especially considering the fact that it was actually Joet Gonzalez's team and family that were pushing for this fight. Shakur didn't even want the fight. So that makes this loss extremely painful and way more deflating for Joet Gonzalez and his whole family. I'll get into why they hate him, but it's very obvious. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the fight, how it played out, and the extreme biased commentary from the blow-by-blow announcer, Bernardo Usana. Now understand this first. Going into this fight, Joet Gonzalez, he had a 7-year advantage in experience as a pro over Shakur Stevenson. But even with all of that experience, Shakur Stevenson was always 2-3 steps ahead of Joet Gonzalez. You know, Floyd Mayweather once said, you bang the boxer and you box the banger. And that's exactly what Shakur Stevenson did. He boxed beautifully in this fight. Almost every time Gonzalez threw a punch, Shakur Stevenson would be right there to answer and counter. Shakur Stevenson's timing, his accuracy, his foot movement, his defense was impeccable in this fight. Going into this fight, Joet Gonzalez, he was known as being a volume puncher. But if you've been watching boxing as long as I have, then you know usually when a volume puncher gets in the ring with a highly skilled, elusive fighter, their punch count drops dramatically. And that's for a couple of reasons. For one, the target is hard to find. The second reason is a fighter becomes very reluctant to let his hands go because he's so worried about the counter. And that's what we've seen in this fight. There were rounds where Joet, he did let his hands go. There were times where he got Shakur Stevenson in the corner and he still could do nothing. Even with Shakur Stevenson being only inches away from Joet's face, he still couldn't land one punch on him. Joet Gonzalez, that is. And then there were a couple of rounds in the middle of the fight where Shakur Stevenson, he just stood toe-to-toe and engaged with Joet. I guess just to show him if he wanted to, he could actually do that as well. And he was effective. But what I thought was pretty interesting is, you know, with Shakur Stevenson's situation where he's dating Joet's sister, he kept making it a point leading up to this fight, it ain't gonna be a knockout. He said it won't be a knockout. He kept saying that. And when I looked at this fight, I start to wonder, did Shakur hold back at all in the fight? Did he hold back because of the situation? Or maybe he just knew how tough Joet was, and he knew he was extremely durable. I don't know. Now let's talk about Bernardo Usana. So throughout the fight, Bernardo, he kept trying to diss Shakur Stevenson by basically saying how, yeah, you know, this is a good performance on the defensive end. He said it's not a war, it's just a chess match. And this is pretty much what people expected out of Shakur Stevenson. Then towards the end of the fight, he said, well, you know, Shakur's detractors, they're not gonna like this because they like an offensive fight. They like knockouts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we know that's not true because when Tyson Fury was fighting against Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, he was fighting a defensive fight. He wasn't in there slugging. And the fans like Bernardo Usana, they were still rooting for Tyson Fury. But by Bernard's logic, they should have all been rooting for Deontay Wilder because that's Wilder's style. He wants to knock you out with every punch he throws. But going back once again to this, oh, you know, he's doing great when it comes to the defense, not so much on the offense, because he said that as well. Let me educate Bernardo Usana and all the other decafs in the sport of boxing. When you're landing almost twice as many punches as your opponent, not only are you the best defensive fighter in the ring, you're the best offensive fighter in the ring as well. I mean, that's no different than a basketball team winning the game by double the points, right? They win 120-60. No one is going to criticize that team or try to make it seem like it's a bad thing by suggesting they only won or they're only looking that great because their defense is so good. I mean, can you think of one sport where it's actually a good thing for the opposing team to score against you? Absolutely not. When you get hit, that's a mistake. That's an error. That's like fumbling the football, throwing an interception, getting sacked, etc., etc., etc. But you just have to read between the lines and decode what a lot of these decafs are saying. He's just saying the same thing that Jim Lampley would say. Because what it really translates to when he says this, oh, he's just a defensive fighter, basically trying to say these black fighters are boring. That's pretty much what Bernardo was saying. But once again, he kept mixing it up with compliments like, oh, this Shakur is on another level. And then once again, he'll go right back to putting some salt on there and saying, on the defensive side. Now, what was interesting as well is he had been saying this throughout the fight, and Tim Bradley was pretty much giving him a pass at the beginning. But it seemed like towards the end, Tim Bradley, he started to realize, wait a minute, this dude is trying to be disrespectful. This dude is trying to discredit Shakur Stevenson. And that's when Tim Bradley, he checked Bernard. Once again, Bernard was saying, yeah, the detractors, they're going to be a little bit upset because he wasn't offensive in the fight, only defensive. And Tim was like, what are you talking about? He's making him pay every time he throws a punch. He said he's landing more punches, he's dominating the fight, and on top of that, he's doing it against a guy who has 7 years experience or advantage. 7 years advantage in experience over Shakur Stevenson as a pro. And that's the reason why Joe Tessitore, he does a much better job. He's far more neutral when he calls fights. And I don't recall Joe Tessitore making too many indirect backhand compliments about black fighters. Who knows, maybe Bernard, he didn't like the idea of Shakur walking into a ring with a sombrero and Mexican colors. But hey, you gotta do your damn job and separate your emotions. At the end of the day, it's called being professional. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.